All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the third installment of the Changemakers interview series. We are so grateful to have spoken with so many inspiring individuals through this series and are very excited for today's episode. This interview series highlights leaders who are making meaningful change in their communities. And especially during this pandemic where it is so easy to lose motivation, we want to use this platform to show that we can still make a difference. Our core values at Sahasra Deepika are to educate and empower. So we are very excited to have this opportunity to continue learning and also that education can happen everywhere.
And as interns at Sahasra Deepika and advocates of its mission of empowering girls, Neha and I are super interested in learning about how your various initiatives are contributing to the upliftment and the empowerment of girls in creative and diverse ways. So thank you again for being here today. Neha and I will be co-hosting this Changemakers interview. Neha is a junior at Brown University studying public health and journalism on the pre-med track, and I'm a sophomore at Johns Hopkins studying political science. We're excited to interview today Kaanchi Chopra. Kaanchi is a student at Rhode Island School of Design pursuing a BFA in industrial design. She's passionate about using both art and design as a tool for social, political, and environmental activism.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kaanchi, for being here with us today. So yeah, let's jump right into it. One thing that I found so impactful about your story is how you describe yourself as an artivist and use this term artivism, which comes from a mixture of art and activism. So, what does that term mean to you, and how have you used your passion and your amazing talent of art for social good?
So I think the term came, I sort of made that term when I was, I think, around 16 years old. And I was so inspired by the work that a lot of activists around the world had been doing. And I always looked at art as a medium to raise awareness. And I think the first piece that I made was when I was 10 years old and I was in fifth grade. We went for this poster designing competition, and the theme was you can make anything impromptu and we were given an art. So I made this theme regarding female infanticide, which is very common in some parts of India. And I still remember the slogan I wrote next to the poster I made, and it said, like a necklace is adorned with pearls, a family is adorned with girls. Do not commit the sin, do not kill girls. And I think since that age, around the age of 10, 11, I have always every time I made some piece, it always felt more impactful when it had a moral attached to it. So automatically, since I got so much encouragement from my peers, from my family, and from my professors, all my art always inclined towards that place where it always had some sort of social message, moral, or meaning attached to it. And I saw the change it was making in my own community within school, and I thought this is the path, this is what I have to continue doing.
Wow, that's such a powerful story.
So
yeah, I know. And it's so cool how it's so personally rooted too. It was all genuinely just you wanting to pursue that yourself. So your work is all about reclaiming our narratives. And what I mean by this is you've said or posted about the lack of diverse art that we study in school and how certain people and artists are left out. So can you tell us a little bit more about this and how that pertains to your work?
So this summer was especially when I felt this conversation needs to happen, right? In regards to the support that BLM movement gained all over the world. Our narratives and our stories need to be shared at a global platform. And I've been reading a lot about artists and designers, especially artists from indigenous tribes in India whose works are not talked about in the mainstream academia. And I want to give recognition to my people who've for so long our works have been stolen. And you both know it, we all three of us study in the United States. We've seen how our pieces have been stolen and have been put into museums, and none of these artists whose works are in the museums have any name associated with them, right? But we all know art, art movements and the names of the pioneers from the West. And that's what our histories have always told, because our histories have been written by people who had power and privilege then, but that thing is not true anymore. People like you and I, who look like us, have that power and privilege, and it's necessary for us to like now rewrite some of the histories that were never like talked about or were just like left untouched. So one of the books that I read over summer, it was this Origins of Art. It's this Gond community in Pathangarh in India, and they talk about like the original of pointillism, which everyone thinks that it originated in the West, but these people have been doing pointillism since like thousands of centuries ago. And one of the most famous artists is Bhaju Shyam, and he made these paintings and like these little illustrations inspired from like the trees. And this is the pointillism thing I was talking about. And these paintings like date back even like the books that some of the people wrote and thought that that were the origins of art. So sort of like realizing that art and design as a concept have originated way before, since the histories have been written, and sort of like digging deep and understanding and finding the names of the people, if not names, the tribal communities that they came from, who like originated these pieces, who started this movements, and sort of like give recognition and name to those people. I think that's what I think I might pursue in my like future ahead. Currently at RISD, we're also hosting Shazia Sikandar, who's like this world famous Pakistani artist, and her work is incredible, and she uses like Indo-Persian art. And I think throughout like this semester, the conversation has been around how we need to like diversify museums, how we need to add people of color and Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the narrative. So currently I'm preparing for that exhibition, and hopefully when I get back to this day, I can actually see that exhibition and make Shahzia like such a big inspiration for me. Yeah.
That's so great to hear. And I just think it's such important work that you're doing. And it's just so important, I guess, that you've recognized it and are now, you know, planning to really take on this project. And it's just really inspiring. So it was great to hear, and also great to that you could just pull out that book and show us. Yeah, so switching gears a bit, one thing that we thought was really interesting was your work about acid attacks in India specifically, both through your art and through your work with burn barriers, which I know is a project you've worked on at RISD. So yeah, could you tell us more about that and just your work around that whole realm?
Yeah, so when I was around 14 years old, I think I was starting high school, was when I saw, I didn't have social media back then, but I read this in a news headline, and it talked about acid assault. And like there were visuals which were graphic, and it was so disturbing. And I was like, wait, this is a thing that happens in our community. And I do, like, obviously I was aware of like the amount of heinous crimes that happen against women in India, but I was never aware of like acid assault as like a concept that happens. So I went on and read about it, and I found out it's like the act of like throwing acid onto like the body of another. It can be a female or male. Most cases in India, 70% like survivors are female survivors. And this is done with the intention to like disfigure or torture, or in some cases kill as well. And like this is also like one of the reasons behind this is because the women say no to marriage. So like refusal to marriage, or even like just refusal to sexual advances by men. These are some of the reasons why women get attacked with acid. And one of the Bollywood movies, Chapak by Deepika Padukone, also highlighted this issue forward. And this is something that has not been a part of like the mainstream conversation, especially like even, I know a lot of, I think NGOs have been like Make Love Not Scars and Stop Acid Attacks. These are two big NGOs in India who've like committed their lives, you know, to like advocating for the rehabilitation and the rights, like completely rewritten laws around the subject of acid assault. So this was my introduction to the subject. Then I visited the space, and after the interactions I had, I just felt like I just visited just to see and just to volunteer. But after, when I came back, it was, I just like started sketching, and I thought that the scar, like I needed to like change the perspective of how people looked at acid attack survivors, because there's so much stigma around their scars and bruises. And the illustrations I made were made with the purpose of like changing how like we, the general public, looks at them and how we need to like respect and honor them, right? Because they've gone through something so inhumane and they have that strength and courage to still survive and like get on with their lives. Like there's another, so some of them run their own enterprise, which is I'm forgetting the name of the cafe, but they run a cafe. So they're all like they're like all self entrepreneurs, and it's so inspiring when you meet them. So the illustrations I made were made with the sole purpose of changing how this like the survivors look at themselves. So I doodled like the scars and bruises as like intricate floral motifs to like remind them of like how much strength and courage they have, and how me as like an outsider, how me as like a simple little girl like literally admires the honor and the bravery that they have. And throughout my time in like I think high school, I always like used illustrations and paintings as a medium to raise awareness. But at RISD, I think with my field of industrial design, I've had the privilege and the resources to design interventions in forms of like products, services, or systems that can not only raise awareness, but also like actually like make products, like make actual genuine physical impact, right? So I pitched this idea to my classmates and my department head in this biodesign makerspace, which is a part of the RISD Nature Lab. And they really liked the idea. So 4 students along with me, we had the honor to like make this bandage, which is made out of chitosan, flicoidin, hydrogel. And the reason hydrogel was used is because it's 90% water, it acts as a disinfectant, it can like, create a barrier between the wound and the environment outside. And once, because it has 90% water, it can like rehydrate and soften the wounds. So a lot of research, like I think the first, like I said, it was a 3-month-long project. The first 6-7 weeks, I was just researching and reading papers about wound treatment, realizing like, because some of these burns are 3rd-degree burns, like, HCl and like H2SO4, these like really harmful acids are used. So like realizing and like thinking what is the most successful way to actually like impact these wounds. We also realized like there's a lot of these attacks are very common in very remote areas. So we were sure that we wanted to make like a design intervention which can be used as a need of emergency. Like we cannot, I think, make products that can solve the wounds, because those things take years of like actual medical treatments. We wanted to make like an emergency intervention. So we made the burn barrier bandage, and initially we were ideating around like, should we make like a dual spray system? But we were thinking about like how, if the acid is thrown on like her face, she cannot see, so how will she pull up like the spray system or like the cream? And then we thought a bandage would be the easiest way, the most like smallest and like sustainable way. So and then we thought a lot about like what material we can use. So we thought of using materials like biomaterials, which are completely biodegradable. So I think that has been one of my most impactful and like most like, I think, leading projects at RISD. And I really wish that I can apply for a grant and actually make this thing real thing, because currently it's a prototype, it's a working prototype. I really hope we can like take this forward after I graduate from RISD and collaborate with like bioengineers to make this happen. Yeah.
Wow, that work that you're doing is so amazing. And this goes to the next question, but it seems like in your process and in your values, you value the individual and like showcasing how they're portrayed. So they're not portrayed as just how we may see them as a victim, but they're portrayed as like strong, independent people who are capable of thriving in their future. So with that, what are your core values as a designer? And how do you choose your projects? What does that process look like? And how do you see it through to the end?
So I think as like the core values, I would say currently of where my interest is going, it has to be empathy. Because for me, like realizing and being in the shoes of the user and like doing like grassroots level research to understand the needs in the customers, not only the needs but also the wants of our customers, a must. So empathy followed by sustainability. I think sustainability is sort of like a buzzword now, but for me at the core, it's like how do I make something that is ethical? How do I make something that has the least possible environmental impact? So that's why I've been experimenting a lot with like mushroom mycelium, bioplastics, kombucha leather, sort of like using like alternative natural resources instead of like toxic chemicals, which already like have affected the environment so much. And we are seeing this like all over the world, the impact of like our environmental disasters. I think the third core value would be like community driven, sort of like having, because I've grown up in India, I think I always think of having a global approach of problem solving. Fourth aspect would obviously like be very ambitious. I think I'm born into a family of entrepreneurs, so I'm always like very like kind of always shoot for the stars, even if it seems something unapproachable, not unapproachable, but something like unreachable. I always feel like the more ambitious I am, the closer I get to like making something that's not been made before. And I think in terms of design process, I always start with like the question that I'm trying to address. So like, so laying out the what, the who, the when, the why, and the how. Then there's like a cycle of like research, ideation, prototyping, and testing. And then under research, like it depends whom I'm designing for. If I'm designing for a brand, then I do a lot of like market research, competitive analysis, SWOT analysis, business model canvases, and then followed by user research. So like making out affinity maps, user journey maps, and then there's ideation. So you brainstorm a lot of like core features and values that you want to put in your design. After ideation, then there's prototyping. So if I'm doing some UI UX work, it has to be low fidelity models, high fidelity models, and then designing like the whole like, you know, language of what the app would look like or what the final product would look like. Then there's testing. So I've done A/B testing in the past, user testing, user reviews, surveys, interviews. And then there's like this cycle of like research, ideation, prototyping, testing again and again until I've reached that level of satisfaction where I feel like it's ready to be launched. The final part is reflection when the project is completed. For me, it's really important to like think about this part, because that's when I'm like, okay, this is what went right. This is what I want to improve on. And this is what I think I did good, right? So like this part of reflection tells me how I will move on to like my next project.
I mean, this is all so amazing, I guess, because I always see like your finished product or something. So hearing about, you know, what is the actual process you go through and how much perseverance that takes to, you know, take it from an idea to a product is so amazing. And I think a lot of people hearing this conversation will, you know, start to look to you as a role model. So one, you know, question we had for you is, you know, do you have any role models? And, you know, what have you been able to take from their work or, you know, their process and, you know, put it into your own?
I have so many. I would start at home. I think my parents and my brother, I'm like very close to my family. And I know they will watch this, so they kind of want me to hit, like, they want me to hit this. But I think like all my family members are like super inspiring. They've made it from scratch. Like they've given me the privileges that I have. And I think I wouldn't be as socially and consciously driven if it wasn't the things that my parents exposed me to, right? So like the kind of, there's always like liberal and woke media, like we do not listen to any news channels. So my parents are very like, and my brother's very protective of the kind of information that I'm around, because, you know, from a very young age, you can be exposed to the wrong side of the media, especially because media in so many parts of the countries, all over the world, is so controlled, right? So I think firstly, it has to be my family. Secondly, like I think of activists from all around the world, like Angela Davis. I think one of my favorite artists from India is Shilo Shiv Suleiman, and she's always used like Indian art, and she's a very big feminist icon. I always say like Kali Mata is also one of my biggest like inspirations, because she's like this little feminist icon who like embraces her skin color and like literally defeats anyone, and who like just does not respect her. So I think I have inspirations and like I think role models from around the world. Even at RISD, I think I've had the honor of meeting so many like talented mentors like Renee Payne and Jess Brown, who are like, you know, these who literally taught me what it means to be a woman of color living in the United States. So I think I meet role models and inspirations like everywhere.
You sound like you had so many great experiences, and it's so nice to hear that you're so appreciative of your family and the people around you and the people that you're surrounded with constantly. It truly takes a village. So it's very touching and very powerful. So I guess our last question to you would be, as a concluding statement, what advice would you offer to other young people who want to make a difference in their communities, especially during the pandemic? How can people help and continue making changes?
So since I'm doing the semester remote as well, so I've been thinking because I'm a designer as well, right? So I do not have access to all like the fancy resources and everything. So I was talking to one of my professors who teaches climate change and disasters, and she made this algae-based raincoat which fully like decomposes itself after a period of time, so it leaves behind zero waste. And that's the kind of like design that I'm super interested in, the field of biodesign. And she said that she made the entire thing in her kitchen, like literally using experiments in her kitchen. She sewed in her kitchen, she built that entire from like food resources and algae in her kitchen. So I genuinely believe if you have the intention and if you have like sort of like you want to create impact, there is no like physical location that you have to be. You can easily, if you know the processes to follow, if you're passionate about what you're doing, you can easily do it from any part of the world. I do certainly feel like it's very important to surround yourself with a community, like with a community who's equally like-minded. And I think this was something that my family was very sure of that I do as well when I go to RISD. Like I'm moving to like a whole different country, right? So I was told to be surrounded by people who are doing work which are incredibly impactful, right? I think another thing I would say is that certainly like keep reading. I think the biggest resource is education. There's this really nice saying, which is imagination and education are the keys to liberation. So it's like, we are literally like the future, like our age group, Gen Z, is the future. And we have to undo so many things that have been done by our past, I wouldn't say ancestors, but like some people in the past. So reading and just thinking outside the box and always like trying to create awareness about issues at a global scale, because there's so many things I feel like I do not know about, and I genuinely love reading about it and always listening to community members talk about it.
Yeah, well, it's so great to hear from you about the importance of education, especially, you know, with both of us being interns for Sahasradeepika. I think we all three can, you know, recognize how important that education is in our growth, in our future, you know, professions, but also just in our daily lives and in our ability to understand people and, you know, hopefully produce impactful work. So yeah, with that, you know, thank you so much for coming on today, Kaanchi. We've loved talking to you and really appreciate everything you've offered.